At the beginning of life, we are taught that parents are protectors, mirrors of love, the essence of care. Yet some of the most poisonous words don't come from strangers, but from those who claim they love us unconditionally. These words don't just sting, they seep into psyche, altering self-worth and warping identity. This is not just bad parenting, this is psychological imprinting that haunts lifetimes.
Have you ever wondered why certain voices still echo in your head at night? Why a simple criticism hits deeper than it should? What if the house you grew up in wasn't a sanctuary, but a minefield of psychological traps? Today, we uncover the words parents say that fracture the mind, distort identity, and leave invisible wounds. This isn't about blaming, it's about understanding how the language of love can sometimes be the language of trauma. Brace yourself. These aren't just phrases, they're psychic fingerprints.
A child does not see themselves clearly. They learn who they are through reflection, not mirrors, but people. And the most powerful mirror is a parent. When a parent criticizes a child's appearance, calling them ugly, fat, skinny, weak, or embarrassing, it does not land as feedback. It lands as truth. Psychologically, this is identity formation under attack. A child does not yet separate what they are from what they look like, so when appearance is mocked, the child unconsciously hears, "There is something wrong with my existence." These words settle deep into the subconscious, where logic cannot reach them later. Over time, this creates a fractured relationship with the body. The body becomes something to fight, control, punish, or hide. Mirrors feel hostile. Compliments feel suspicious. Criticism feels familiar, even comforting, because it matches the internal voice planted years ago. Many adults don't realize their body insecurity didn't start with society or social media. It started at home. Philosophically, this is a violation of sacred trust. The body is our first home, and parents are meant to protect that home, not vandalize it. When parents shame appearance, they teach children that worth is conditional, fragile, and constantly under threat. Love becomes something you earn by looking acceptable. This often leads to perfectionism or self-neglect. Some children become obsessed with control, dieting, gym culture, cosmetic changes, trying to finally become acceptable. Others give up entirely, believing no amount of effort will ever be enough. Both paths are rooted in the same wound: rejection. The darkest part is this: the child grows up continuing the abuse internally. Even when the parent is gone, the voice remains. The insult becomes self-talk. The damage becomes self-sustaining. Healing begins when the individual realizes this truth. Those words were never objective observations. They were projections of the parent's unresolved shame, insecurity, or bitterness. The body was never the problem. It was the battlefield. Reclaiming self-worth means learning to see the body not as something to be judged, but as something that carried you through survival. That realization doesn't erase the wound, but it weakens the poison.
Every child is born different in temperament, curiosity, sensitivity, imagination. But when a parent repeatedly says things like, "Why are you so weird? Why can't you be normal?" or "What's wrong with you?" individuality becomes a liability. Psychologically, this is the moment authenticity begins to die. The child learns that being themselves leads to ridicule, tension, or rejection. So they adapt, they shrink, they edit themselves. Not because they want to, but because safety demands it. This creates what psychologists call false self-development.
The child builds a version of themselves designed to be tolerated rather than loved. The real self doesn't disappear, it hides, and hidden things don't grow. They stagnate in shame. Philosophically, this is one of the deepest betrayals a parent can commit. A child's uniqueness is not a flaw, it is their essence. When a parent mocks it, they send a message far more dangerous than anger. Your true self is unacceptable. That belief shapes an entire life. As adults, these children often struggle to make decisions, express opinions, or feel confident in who they are. They constantly second-guess themselves. They feel fake, empty, or disconnected, not because they lack personality, but because they were taught to abandon it. Many become chronic people pleasers. Others become emotionally numb. Some oscillate between rebellion and shame. All of it traces back to the same wound, rejection of identity. The tragedy is that parents often disguise this cruelty as humor or discipline. "I was just joking. I'm preparing you for the real world." But the child's nervous system doesn't hear jokes, it hears threat. Healing requires something radical. Permission to exist without justification, to be strange, to be quiet, to be intense, to be different. It means unlearning the idea that love must be earned through conformity. The real self never disappears. It waits patiently for safety. And when given even a small amount of compassion, it begins to breathe again.
There are words that bruise, and then there are words that annihilate. "I wish you were never born" is not an insult. It is an existential erasure. For a child, this statement attacks the foundation of being. Love from the parent is not optional. It is psychological oxygen. When a parent expresses regret for a child's existence, the child internalizes a terrifying conclusion. My existence itself is a mistake. Psychologically, this creates deep attachment trauma. The child does not just fear abandonment, they expect it. They often grow up believing they must compensate for being alive. They apologize too much. They overfunction in relationships. Or they self-sabotage, believing happiness is undeserved. Philosophically, this phrase answers one of life's biggest questions in the most brutal way. Why am I here? And the answer becomes, I shouldn't be. That belief corrodes meaning, purpose, and self-respect. Many adults who heard this grow up with chronic emptiness, depression, or suicidal ideation, not because they want to die, but because they were taught that their existence inconveniences others. The cruel irony is that this statement almost always reflects the parent's pain, not the child's. It comes from regret, exhaustion, resentment, or unresolved trauma. But children cannot contextualize that. They personalize it. Healing from this wound requires a philosophical rebellion, a refusal to accept someone else's inability to love as proof of one's worthlessness. It means reclaiming existence as a fact, not a permission. You were not born by accident, even if you were unplanned, even if you were unwanted. Existence does not require approval. That truth doesn't erase the damage, but it gives the soul a place to stand. When parents repeatedly say, "You cost too much," "I sacrificed everything for you," or "You ruined my life," they convert love into debt. Psychologically, this creates existential guilt. The child learns that their needs harm others, that asking for care creates suffering. As a result, they suppress their needs, emotions, and desires, becoming hyper-independent or emotionally invisible.
They grow into adults who struggle to receive help, love, or rest. Every act of care feels undeserved. Every relationship feels transactional. Love becomes something to repay rather than experience. Philosophically, this distorts the nature of responsibility. A child did not ask to be born. The obligation belongs to the parent. When parents reverse that responsibility, they weaponize sacrifice and poison gratitude. This dynamic often leads to burnout, resentment, or emotional collapse later in life. The child becomes the adult who gives endlessly and feels empty, or the adult who avoids closeness entirely to escape guilt. Healing requires separating responsibility from blame. A parent's struggles are real, but they were never the child's fault. Love given under resentment is not love. It is emotional manipulation. You were never a burden. You were a responsibility, and those are not the same. Comparison is one of the most socially accepted forms of emotional violence. When parents constantly say, "Why can't you be like them?" they erase individuality and replace it with hierarchy. Psychologically, this creates chronic inadequacy. No matter how much the child achieves, there is always someone better. Success feels hollow. Failure feels catastrophic. The child never feels enough because enough keeps moving. Philosophically, comparison denies the uniqueness of existence. No two people are meant to be identical, yet comparison demands sameness as proof of worth. As adults, these children often live in quiet competition with everyone around them. They measure life instead of living it. They struggle with envy, self-doubt, and burnout, not because they lack ability, but because they were trained to see themselves as inferior. Healing means abandoning borrowed standards and choosing self-defined value. Threats like "I'll leave you" or repeated broken promises teach children one devastating lesson: love is unstable. Psychologically, this creates abandonment anxiety and insecure attachment. The child never feels safe. They become hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning for signs of rejection. Relationships feel dangerous, even when they're healthy. Philosophically, trust is the foundation of meaning. When trust collapses early, the world feels unpredictable and hostile. These children grow into adults who either cling desperately or detach completely. Both are survival strategies born from the same wound. Healing requires consistency, honesty, and self-trust, learning that not everyone leaves. Toxic parenting is rarely loud. It doesn't always look like rage, violence, or chaos. Most of the time, it hides behind responsibility, sacrifice, tradition, and the dangerous excuse of "I did my best." And that's what makes it so powerful and so destructive. Children don't need perfect parents. They need aware ones. If you recognized yourself in even one of these 8 signs, this is not a sentence. It is a mirror. The moment you feel defensive, uncomfortable, or angry, that is not an attack on your identity. That is your conscience asking to be acknowledged. Because damage doesn't require intention, it only requires repetition. For those who grew up hearing these words, understand this: the pain you carry was not proof of weakness, it was proof of exposure. You were emotionally unprotected. You adapted. You survived. And survival often looks like anxiety, numbness, self-doubt, or exhaustion in adulthood. None of that makes you broken. It makes you human. But awareness creates responsibility. If you continue the same patterns, the same words, the same silences, you don't just raise a child, you pass down unresolved trauma quietly, efficiently, generation after generation. And one day, that child will sit alone, questioning their worth, replaying your voice in their head, long after you believe the moment has passed. Here is the hardest truth. Love without safety is not love. Discipline without empathy is control. Sacrifice without accountability is manipulation. The cycle ends only when someone chooses self-reflection over ego, when a parent dares to say, "I was wrong," when they listen instead of defend, when they understand that authority does not grant immunity from harm. And if you are the child of a toxic parent, healing does not require forgiveness on demand. It requires clarity. It requires recognizing that their limitations were never your responsibility to fix. You are allowed to grow beyond the environment that shaped you. Breaking generational trauma is not dramatic. It is quiet. It happens in pauses, in changed language, in choosing not to repeat what once wounded you. This video isn't about hate. It's about truth. Because the most dangerous parent is not the one who makes mistakes. It is the one who refuses to see them. And the strongest person in the room is not the loudest. It is the one brave enough to break the cycle.